知るということは逃すということだ。単に存在するということは見つけることです。真実が今呼び起こされる。To know is to miss. To simply be is to find. Truth is now evoked. 見えてきた真実への道。それども道は無限だ。剣の切り口。A path to truth, seen, yet the path is limitless, the cut of a sword. Feel by unfeeling, seeing through not seeing, touching without touching, the stance of no stance. What you seek is already there, until you notice it, and then it no longer is. These ideas permeate the very fabric of historical Japanese martial arts, interweaving themselves so tightly and seamlessly to the point that one cannot distinguish between fabric and embroidery. No matter the historical Japanese author's personality or background, they all seem to use these expressions in order to make their meaning clear. To the eyes of the West, without knowledge of this approach, it can appear as counterintuitive or even purposefully misleading. However, if we are to shed any form of light on this subject so that the truth may begin to become visible, we must do our utmost to transport ourselves, seeing these texts through their eyes. As always, I'm providing my informed opinion for you based on my own research, but I encourage you to think critically on this and take the time to look into this further yourself. And, as always, I will leave a list of the texts I use in the description of this video to aid in your own investigation. While Buddhism was the first key religion from the Asian mainland introduced to Japan and instituted as the dominant religion as early as the Nara period in the nation, upon its arrival to Japan, Zen undertook a different role. Before its arrival, members of the Buddhist clergy in Japan noticed the deteriorating power of the court aristocracy in the late 12th and early 13th centuries. The imperial court previously were the main patrons of the Buddhist faith, and their decrease in power also resulted in the deterioration of the upper-class Buddhist priesthood. The increased politicization and materialist movements in the established bodies turned some of the Buddhist clergy away and desirous of searching for answers abroad. Upon discovering Zen in China and completing their studies there, they returned to Japan. Curiously, though, Zen did not arrive on its own. Neo-Confucianism also came along with it, and Taoist philosophies had already been in Japan for centuries due to cultural influences from Tang Dynasty China. This is why seeing Zen in isolation is somewhat misleading, as it is often mutually inclusive of Taoist and Neo-Confucianist theories in Japan. This video, however, is trying to focus specifically on Zen itself. The 14th century shogunate established Zen in Kyoto, not only in religious institutions, but also philosophy, education, and the arts. Unlike Buddhism in the previous centuries, Zen Buddhism was then able to connect with the entire population of Japan and was not mostly exclusive to the nobility. This positioned Zen Buddhism as a turn away from finery, luxury, and lavish lifestyles of the nobility in the old mainstream Buddhism in pursuit of the simple and natural. It is also, at this time, why we begin to see an increasing appreciation for beauty and simplicity, and soon, the traditional Japanese tea ceremony would also be affected by this movement, championed by individuals such as Senno Rikyu, until it resembles what we see today. Zen was used by the military rulers of Japan, the shoguns, as a form of cultural revolution that emphasized the legitimacy of warriors as secular leaders. While the warrior class was far from the only one of its kind to associate themselves with Zen, the warrior class and their martial arts appear to be inextricably linked to Zen ever since the belief system graced the shores of the Japanese archipelago. All the way to the 16th century, the gap between heavily politicized Zen and purely spiritual Zen seemed to widen, with spiritual Zen almost disappearing from the cultural radar at the beginning of the final shogunate that heralded the arrival of the Edo period in the early 17th century. Things looking beautiful on the outside is something Zen will often condemn, as focusing on something that turns away from reality. This provides an already explicit link to the practice of martial arts. I'll explain in detail. In his writings, Musashi uses the image of flowers and their seeds, explaining that people can focus so much on making themselves a commodity that they completely miss the basis of reality in their practice. In other words, people focus on the flower rather than the seed. Quote, "As I see society, people make the arts into commercial products. They even think of themselves as commodities and also make implements for their commercial value. This attitude is like flowers compared with seeds. The flowers are more numerous than the seeds. There is more decoration than reality." In addition to prioritizing the origins of something rather than its outward final appearance, no matter how simple those origins may be, Zen uses an approach that is almost completely contrarian to any form of extreme. This view is used in martial arts in various ways, using two polar opposite imageries in order to present a message to the practitioner. This is viewed in the following classic Zen proverb: "This is it, but if you fixate on it, then it isn't anymore." Yagyu Minori uses this when explaining the use of a bow and a sword, and explaining that conscious thought can often lead to failure even if that conscious thought is thinking of the correct thing. Quote, "Suppose you are shooting, and you think you are shooting while you are shooting. Then the aim of your bow will be inconsistent and unsteady. If you are conscious of wielding a sword, your offense will be unstable. It is when you have nothing on your chest that you are on the way. Whatever you do, if you do it with nothing in your chest, it works out easily." Close quotes. We also see this in seemingly contradicting statements, such as the mind of no mind. Again, a common approach in Zen by putting two polar opposites together in order to make a point. Once again, Yagyu Minori is using Zen philosophies to elucidate concepts in martial arts. Quote, "What is called sickness is fixation. The monk who has left fixation behind, however, can mingle with the dust of worldly affairs and not be stained. He is free in whatever he does and abides in no one place. A monk asked an ancient worthy, 'What is the way?' The worthy replied, 'Your ordinary mind, that is the way.'" Close quotes. This normal mind is also echoed by Musashi, and then hinted at by one of Ito Itosai's successors when they warn against coloring the opponent. One may think that, as a result, one must expel all extraneous thoughts from the mind in order to achieve this. However, in using the Zen approach, even the effort to expel thoughts is still a thought. By trying to make yourself ready, you therefore are not. Quote, "The thought of expelling sickness is itself sickness. Sickness will be expelled by abandoning yourself to it and carrying on within its midst. No mind, however, is not a state of having no mind at all. It is simply your ordinary mind." Close quotes. One of Minori's forebears, the famous martial artist and Zen practitioner Takuan Soho, elaborates on this concept, again with a Zen approach, by explaining that it is through training and practice that you are a student, a practitioner with blocking questions, and then someone who knows without knowing. Quote, "In the beginning, you don't know anything. You hardly even have any questions on your mind. Then when you enter into study, there is something on your mind, and you are blocked by it. This makes everything difficult to do. When what you have studied leaves your mind entirely, and practice also disappears, then when you perform whatever art you are engaged in, you accomplish the techniques easily, without being concerned over what you have practiced, and yet without deviating from what you have practiced. This is spontaneously conforming without being aware that you are doing so." Close quotes. As a modern example, when you begin to drive a car, you are constantly consciously thinking about each step. When you merge lanes, for example, it is a step of indicate, mirror check, then shoulder check, then turn the wheel. However, when you have been driving for a long time, you do not even think of these when you merge. It is not that you are not going through the motions in your mind. Instead, you are just not aware of those thought processes because you are so familiar with the task you are doing. Going back to the Zen approach, when you are aware that you know, then you no longer do. It is only being unaware of your knowing that you begin to truly know. This is why, In the Zen approach, the mind, in any skill, including martial arts, must not abide or stick anywhere, or it will miss the bigger picture. As Takuan explains, quote, "No matter where you put it, if you put your mind in one place, the rest of your body will lack its functioning. If you don't put it anywhere, it will go to all parts of your body and extend throughout its entirety." Close quotes. He also uses the metaphor of focusing only on the leaf of a tree, preventing you from viewing the whole tree. If you see the tree, you naturally see every leaf as a result. When this is placed in the context of martial arts, how many times have we heard the phrase that resembles something along the lines of, "The punch that knocks you out is the punch you don't see coming," or "The technique that hits you is the technique you don't see coming." This is the problem that the martial arts writers at the time in Japan seem to be using Zen in order to address. Specifically, if you focus on any one thing, you will likely be hit by the one thing you inevitably were not focusing on. Instead, if you are viewing the picture in its entirety, how could you be taken by surprise? Or, if we are using Zen phrasing, it is by not focusing that you are able to truly focus. While this focuses on the mindset behind training and application of martial arts, we are also given an approach through Zen to understand kamae, or stances. Musashi explains that he has a no stance stance. If that doesn't sound Zen, then I don't know what does. Quote, "The teaching of stance no stance means that you must not focus your mind on assuming a particular fighting stance. With swords in hand, you will adopt various stances as dictated by location and circumstances. You must hold the long sword so that you can cut your enemy convincingly at any time. This is why I teach. There are stances, but there is no stance." Specifically, while guards, or kamae, exist, they are not fixed positions from which you stand on guard statically. Instead, stances are viewed less as static positions, but rather positions you are in or move through during a fight for purposes such as attack and defense. Once again, if we go back to Zen phrasing and Zen thought, the stance in combat is having no stance. As Yamamoto Kansuke states, quote, "It is said that Kenjutsu contains 1,000 changes and 10,000 variations, or muryo without end. Taking hold of any chance and responding to any henka, or variation, by striking is of the utmost importance." Close quotes. Now that we have analysed not only a basic history of Zen, but also its ideas and approach to the martial arts, we will conclude by looking at a final example of Zen, as used by the Shinkage-ryu in the Enpi no Mokuroku in the year 1605, using the symbol of a tengu. To explain, a tengu is a form of mountain goblin spirit in Japanese folklore who are often experts in martial arts. Quote, "Attacks never turn out to be attacks. Defenses never turn out to be defenses. The technique a tengu shows turns out to not be the one shown. Therefore, his hidden intent turns out to be his hidden intent. The tengu fights from both above and below, as if both were the heavens." This brings us to the end of this investigation into Zen in historical Japanese martial arts. Do you have thoughts or further points of discussion? Share them in the comments. Remember to always think critically and discuss with genuineness and civility. Is what you heard intriguing? Subscribe to this channel and join the mate community. And as always, I will see you mates in the next video. Bye-bye.